All right, good morning, everybody. Now, welcome to this panel, the first panel of the Capital Link conference. Now, we have a fantastic panel lineup today. We have 3 ship owners. We have Gary from EGLE, Marco from Premuda, Captain Zhou from Kwong, and then we have also one supplier, ExxonMobil, John, and also a few experts, Steve B. Now, everybody knows that in the shipping industry, we revolve around the ship owners. So I think what we will do is that we will start with the ship owners so that we will get a clearer idea of what they are doing, what they will be doing, and then we'll move on to the fuel suppliers and also the fuel experts. Now, I think I'll start with Gary. Now, Gary, I think you are a big supporter of scrubber. You were modernizing your fleet for the past 5 years, and you've been doing it, and also you've been retrofitting scrubbers and all. Now, we are 90 days into 2020. So I would like to see, how do you think your strategy is working out for you? And how's the fuel availability and how's the fuel spread, price spread working out for you? Your views on that?
Yeah, thank you. So, clearly things have been extremely fluid over the last 90 days. We came into 2020 with extremely wide fuel spreads. They narrowed, as we expected, and then most recently with the flood of, Saudi crude in the market and the precipitous drop in oil prices, we've seen a further reduction in that fuel spread. Currently around 90. The forwards are up around 100 for the balance of this year and 110, significantly lower. I mean, the scrubbers themselves have been working well. We had 38. We're finishing up the last couple. We'll have a total of 41 out of 50 ships, so a bit over 80% of our fleet. So, we believe that as fuel prices moderate, long term, that fuel spread will widen again. Fortunately for us, we took a position that we wanted to hedge a significant portion of that fuel spread. And as I mentioned, at one point, the fuel spreads, were up in the high 200s for the balance of this year. So we've covered about 25% of our, call it our HSFO fuel requirements for 2020 and 2021 at levels close to 230 and 150 respectively. So, I think it's early days, just like I think it was probably not very helpful to calculate, returns a week into or 2 weeks into January. I think given the current environment of COVID-19 plus, as I mentioned, the oil price, I think it's not very helpful. Having said that, even at $100 fuel spread, a company like EGLE, we calculate high level to generate around $24 million of incremental EBITDA on the back of that fuel spread. And so, we consider that very acceptable, especially given the dynamic that we're in today.
Right, thank you, Gary. Yes, actually 90 days is very short, especially you're comparing that to the life span of the scrubber or even the ships. Now, I would like to move on to Marco. Now, Marco, I think your position is kind of like the opposite, that you don't use scrubber. So for you, what do you think of the situation so far, 90 days into 2020?
Well, the position is not the opposite, just for the sake of opposite. Our position was kind of opposite because our fleet until recently has been mainly of more middle-sized ships. So we mainly had MRs, and on the bulker side, we had the handy bulkers. So I personally didn't believe that retrofitting these kind of ships, apart being very complicated for the different pattern of trade, that would have been a good thing to install scrubbers. Now we have, we always had 2 LR2s, which were now that it works. One is at work for doing ballast water treatment plant. Then we've been getting into the fleet 5 LR2s. So now the problem is going to be posed for us, but certainly how things have been going, I think we'll be watching the situation and deciding a little bit later on. I don't think that there is this urgency in the side. Also because shipyards are very full in this moment. So if whenever we decide that any chance of retrofitting with scrubbers would be a decision we would take later down the road.
All right, thank you. Now, what about Captain Zhou? I think I was reading something which your chairman, Mr. Chow, he has made the statement, it was done last year, end of last year, said the role of Kwong, besides a ship owner, is also a service provider on ship management and need to work closer with charterers. Now, I think nowadays, actually, Kwong is talking about these Kwong lights. So I'm wondering, for the position of scrubber or not, actually, does it have anything to do with your existing strategy?
Thank you, Ben. Basically, we also did a very careful analysis based on our ship type, as well as the ship's employment models. So our position, our decision was to switch in to low sulfur fuel for all the existing fleet. So it after now already this already passed for 90 days, and it is work out very well. And we have a very smooth transitions. So we did not install retrofitting any scrubber for existing ships. However, we decided to install the scrubbers for our new buildings, and which is to be delivered this year. So we have not had any actual operational experiences on the scrubbers. So for the operating with the low sulfur, and we did not experience any technical issue or compliance issues. However, we remain very cautious to the quality and the compatibility of the new fuels supplied to our ships. Basically, we implement additional preventative policies. We do not allow the mixed bunkers for different ports and suppliers. Our contracted laboratory will perform additional tests, like such as a reserve stability number and the total exit number, etc., which is over the normal ISO standard. In addition, we also supply the compatibility test kits to on board.
Right.
Our engineer can perform a simple test before into use. So far, it works out very well. Thank you.
Thanks, Captain Zhou. Actually, I'd like to have also a follow-up question on that. Now, for the crews, do you plan to, because you'll be having ships with scrubbers coming on, then what do you see of the training of the crew? And also, I know that Kwong actually recently set up an office in Shenzhen, and I think partially the function is also about crewing. So how do you think that's working out for you?
Yes, we do, because of our expansion of the management business, we recently set up a new office in Shenzhen, and we also have the additional crewing office in Qingdao and provide crew trainings. I think for the scrubber, it is a new equipment on board, and definitely we need to give some trainings to our crew, and for taking over those new ships. And our crew will be joining the ship in well advance, starting from attending sea trials. So they will follow with the mechanical engineer for the commissioning testing of the scrubbers, and also have received trainings, operational trainings from the mechanical engineers.
I see. What about Gary and Marco? What do you see of the crew's training for the use of scrubber? Do you see that as like an additional cost on top of the cost of the scrubber? And how do you see any difficulties of training the crew or having the crew availability with the scrubber trained?
This is just hypothetical for us because we don't have scrubbers, but for sure, I think you'll have to have some training of crews on board, and that will make it a little bit more difficult. I don't know how much availability there is for crews that are trained on scrubbers because it's kind of a new system. So I think probably you'll have some issues there, and for sure there's going to be some cost added on the training and everything. But as I told you, it's an hypothetical; it's not out of experience.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, no question about it. So, I mean, as our vessels have come out of the yard, there's a commissioning process. The crews have been, of course, on board the vessel during installation, so that gives you that time with the supplier to discuss operations, goes through the commissioning. We've also set up a central resource at the company so that vessels can contact people with knowledge, and as well, of course, we have as being a fairly significant customer, we have direct access to suppliers. So like any piece of equipment, same with ballast water treatment system, right? There's an additional piece of equipment that requires, training, and it's a process. And of course, as new crews come on board, they need to be trained as well. Having said that, our experience thus far has been extremely positive. It's a straightforward piece of equipment. Some of the issues around sensors and things like that we've been able to clear quickly, and but there's no question about it. It's another piece of equipment. There's incremental training as well as maintenance costs like anything else on board a ship.
Right. Thank you, Gary. Now I would like to move on to John. Now, John, you used to be a seafarer, superintendent, chief engineer, contract negotiator, energy conservation specialist, and now with the fuel supplier. So it seems like you should know both sides very well. Now, my question to you is, now 90 days into 2020, now how do you see the actual demand on the high and low sulfur fuel? Is it in line with your planning and forecast? And also for that, actually, the price spread, because actually it affects a lot on the return on the scrubber. So the price spread, is it also within your forecast?
I don't think, thanks, Ben. I don't think anyone could have forecasted what we're going through today. Right. Starting with the drop in the prices of oil and continuing with the COVID-19. So I think that probably is maybe a little bit difficult question to answer. But I think one of the things we can focus on is the challenges that we faced as an industry. I think what's really, really interesting is that industry came together, all sides, and worked together to identify some of the risks. Some of the big risks were compatibility and different types of fuel being developed, and got those risks out to the suppliers, out to the end users. We didn't see the disruption we saw that when the ECAs first came into effect. So I think, if we look how we manage that and going forward, and Steve can elaborate a little bit further on what he's seen as far as off-spec fuel. I don't think it's been as large as we expected it to be. So in that matter, I think what's going to happen is that we've got these new challenges with depressed prices. That's good for the ship owner side. Maybe not so good from the supplier side. You may see some operators, suppliers not be in business in the future. I think what's important is we have a plan going forward to meet the energy needs of the ship owners, whether it's high sulfur fuel, whether it's VLSFO, or even eco-fuel. So I think that's what's really important in the challenge. The market is going to drive the price. So I don't think, we have a lot of comment on what it's going to be or what it's going to do. We have to rise to the challenge and meet the demands of what our industry, the ship owners, need.
Right. Thank you, John. Now, Steve, John just mentioned about the compatibility. Now, for these 3 months, actually, in terms of compatibility, like the reports on the incompatibility and also geographic locations of where is this happening the most, what kind of advice you would give to the ship owners and operators?
Well, I think compatibility is not a new issue. In relation to IMO 2020 and the VLSFO fuels, compatibility has been something that the industry has had to contend with, for a number of years. And always the advice has been, whenever possible, don't obviously mix fuels. Now, obviously, operationally, that's it can be incredibly difficult at times. With the new fuels, so far it's been reasonably good. I mean, we've undertaken a number of compatibility studies for our clients, and in the main, I would say probably things have been relatively good. But I think it's key really to know as much about the fuel prior to receiving and burning that fuel through testing, in order to understand the properties of the fuel, and obviously that will help mitigate any potential risks. I mean, in terms of quality, John touched on that earlier, and in the first sort of 10 weeks of 2020, VPS have actually issued 15 bunker alerts. This is in comparison to only 3 bunker alerts over the same time period last year. Now, of these 15 bunker alerts, they're not just related to the new fuels. Only 4 were related to VLSFOs, 5 were related to distillates, and 6 were related to the high sulfur fuel oils. And they, so it shows that it's, the issues are across the board when it comes to the fuel type. And also the parameters, the parameters covered by bunker alerts have been such like sediment, flash point, density, low viscosity, potassium and sodium. And as I say, quite a geographical spread across the globe that are not fixed to one specific region. So I think looking at fuel overall, compatibility is something that we've always had to deal with. We've always had to look for and be considerate of, and the VLSFO fuels are no different.
I see. Thank you. What about the non-availability reports? Is it being seen a lot, or actually is quite good that actually it is not really an issue, non-availability?
Are you speaking in respect to the phone hours?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've not personally had any bit of any specific issues with regard to phone hour matters. But however, I have read recently, I think it was on Ship and Bunker earlier this week, where the IMO had actually received 41 phone hour filings in January, yet only 6 phone hour filings in February. The January report showed that there was issues in Brazil and Sri Lanka and India with regard to VLSFO supply. However, it seems that Brazil in particular have seemed to be able to eradicate that shortage over the course of February. So I think as far as availability is concerned, there is a good availability of VLSFOs. There is a good, obviously, availability of gas oil without a doubt. And if I look at the numbers that we had for the first 2 months, certainly February in particular, VLSFOs probably accounted for 65% of the fuels that VPS had seen. So I think it shows that there is availability of these fuels in the majority of ports.
I see. Thank you. Now, going back to the ship owners, now I would like to go back to macro. I was reading an article, and which I think you mentioned consolidation is the medicine which is needed in the sector. And everyone likes market consolidation, but nobody likes to be consolidated. Now, I'm wondering, because actually now, I think for these 2 years, actually the whole world is going through quite a bit of trouble. Last year we had the trade war, and it changed quite a bit of the shipping pattern. And this year we got this COVID-19. Now, do you see this actually is going to make, together with the IMO 2020, do you see this actually is making it happening, consolidation of the sector?
Well, I think the consolidation, as I said, it is something everybody looks for. Then there is the point of nobody wants to be consolidated, but then there are some cases where you're obliged to get consolidated. The company that I'm running now, it is very much a company that's running fleets of vessels, mainly repossessed or in distress. So we're running those ships. So indirectly there is a consolidation, especially in the Italian market. There's been a kind of of a strong consolidation in that segment. So I would go back to my statement, consolidation has to happen, nobody wants to be consolidated, but then there are certain events that are pushing towards consolidation. I think the more the market becomes specialized, the more there's going to be need for consolidation, and also the size of fleets that are present on the market. I remember 23 years ago when I joined my previous employer, a fleet of 15 MRs was a big fleet. Today, if you don't control 50 MRs or 30 MRs, you're not a player at all. So the scale has certainly become bigger and bigger. So I think that in the future, this matter of consolidation will continue. Then there is shipping is very much a market in which it is very much of a market where you have the figure of ship owners. So I think these kind of figures will always exist, but then they are going to be created larger consolidation. And if you want to expand on that, I think that consolidation can happen mainly through acquiring of ships, but also can happen through managing pools or chartering in ships. By consolidation, I mean that one entity has a control over a larger number of ships. Then it doesn't necessarily need to own those ships.
Right. Thank you. Now, what about the winning factor? As you mentioned, nobody likes to be consolidated. Then what will be the winning factor ahead for the shipping industry, which will be keeping the shipping industries or particular companies away from being consolidated? Would it be very astute financial management, or, for example, technology or being green? What will be the winning factor?
Well, I think that in general in shipping, I think the segment in which you operate, I think it's always very good to be a market leader in a niche segment. So necessarily being in a niche segment and being the market leader in that will preserve you from consolidation. But I think that a lot is going to be a question also of financial responsibility. Companies that are financially strong will not need to be consolidated because there won't be a default event or something like that. I think the companies that are successful commercially will not need to be consolidated because they have their customer base, which are very attached. So there is some niches there happening in the market. For sure, I think the moment you want to consolidate and look at larger entities, for sure this is going to happen also for the fact that also the people on the other side, the big traders, the oil companies, they're becoming less and less and less. So I think there is a kind of verticalization of the whole process where you have few customers representing a lot part of your business. So I think, and for being relevant to those few companies and being a large part of their business, you need to have a relevant fleet to serve all their purposes. So I think to answer your question, to preserve a consolidation, financial, and I think good management, those probably will preserve you from this.
Thank you, Marco. Some may wonder why I am asking this question, because actually I think given there are so many events globally happening these couple of years, I was thinking IMO 2020 actually could be the last straw on certain companies. So actually for that, that would be quite relevant. So now, Gary, same question to you. Now, what do you see is a winning factor to keep the companies away from being consolidated, bearing in mind the global events that are happening right now?
Yeah, thanks, Benjamin. And maybe I'll start going back a second, because I do think that going into IMO 2020 last year, you know, one of the hurdles for consolidation was you had two camps: people installing scrubbers, people who weren't. And they had their view, and now we have clarity on that. And of course, we have a bit of lack of clarity on the forward markets, given what's happening in the world at the moment. So I think that's helpful. But as Marco said, I mean, the things that are you know, success factors, if you will, to be a surviving entity are things that he mentioned. I think also strong governance is helpful as well, especially if the entity that's going to be, you know, acquired, merged into another one and becomes a shareholder. I think a trust factor that the management are good stewards of the capital and have alignment with the shareholders is really critical. But I fully agree, it's having a core competency, whatever that may be within your area, a focus on a certain niche, customer relationships, commercial management, and embracing technology and using, looking forward. And I also think as we go forward, the things we talked about, the ability to train crews on equipment and having the scale to deal with various new regulations, you simply can't do that effectively, efficiently, being a small company. So it's really, I think it's about, executing well for yourself, and then you become a natural survivor in a consolidation play.
Thank you, Gary. Yes,
well,
I think.
I wanted to add also something here. The events that we're looking at now, the spread on the bunker and everything that's reducing between, it's not due to coronavirus, but it's mainly due to the internal fight inside of OPEC that decided to produce as much as they can, everybody. So, it's not something, this is a fallout effect, as an effect that has nothing to do with coronavirus. So I think coronavirus is bringing other problems. What's happening now in bunker levels and in utilization of a lot of the tanker fleet, it is due mainly to a commercial war within OPEC and OPEC plus. I think it's totally different events.
Yes, thank you. Now, Kevin Zhou, what's your view on that? Now, consolidation, and actually, I think for the family shipping business here in Hong Kong, actually, obviously, for the past decades, they have right through the storms. So actually, for Captain Zhou, for the Kwong point of view, how do you see the consolidation, and how could Kwong be actually be the winner out from this?
And from our own experience, I think I think the key things we are achieved and also quite a success in this area is we call the loyalty-driven quality, where it's making the quality very consistent. Basically, our role in the market, we are a tonnage provider. Being a family company, we already company already there for 68 years, and it's quite an older family company. In the meantime, we have many very loyal staffs working in companies. Some of them working for this company over 40 years, and including myself, I actually worked for Kwong already since 1995. So that is already 25 years. I would say this is the loyalty-driven the quality is making the service delivery is very consistent. So far, we received quite many positive comments from our clients, like charters. So it's for our experience, we think it's quite unique as quite important.
Thank you, Kevin Zhou. Now, John, earlier, I think it was Gary mentioned about the technology. Now, looking ahead in terms of the different kind of availability or alternative fuel, which the shipping community is looking at, let it be LNG or ammonia or hydrogen or any other things. What do you see from it? ExxonMobil, have you any plan for any particular kind of fuel to focus on, and what do you see on the green fuel future?
Yeah, I think that's very, very important. I think we as society, understand that going green and reducing carbon emissions and pollution is very important, not just for shipping, but globally. So I think what's going to happen going forward, until we have that next big breakthrough, the next technology, you'll see a number of different fuel types out there. And again, whether it's niche markets like faced with batteries or LPG carriers, LNG will certainly fill a little bit of that. But I think you're going to see a lot of different ones. There's not, at this point, there's not one fuel solution. I think what's really important is that we as an industry work together. If you look at the lifespan of a ship, 20, 25 years, how long it takes to design and build and construct, we all need to come up with a plan on how to get to 2030 and to 2050 and work together. It's not just one part of the industry to do that. And I think if this is any indication of what we did to come together for just 2020, I think we can meet those needs no matter what that energy is going to look like in the future.
Right, thank you. Now, Steve, what about from your perspective? Let it be, say, for the future fuel, what will be the most deciding factor of whether it will become a mainstream fuel in the future?
I think again, it's probably more down to obviously supply and demand. Obviously, it will be customer driven and as well as legislatively driven. But I think you've got to look at the different requirements for each of these fuels. So whether it be hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, LNG, they all come with different handling considerations, both obviously in the transfer of the fuel, as well as obviously how they are stored on board ship. So a lot of these fuels are coming in a gaseous form, need to be compressed and liquefied, which obviously again comes with its own complexities. But in my mind, I don't think there's no such thing as a bad fuel. I think all fuels have their pros and their cons, and as long as you're aware of the potential cons, as it were, beforehand, and you can actually account for those, then I think any fuel within a certain consideration would be a useful fuel. They all have levels of energy, they all have their own pros in terms of how they can be used, but I think overall it will be driven by the market as well as the legislation.
Thank you, Steve. Yes. Now, actually, I think time actually is running short, and now I would like to, before I end this panel, actually, I would like to make sure that we are addressing also the COVID-19 because for the IMO 2020, it's been hovering around above the shipping industry for a decade. So everybody actually is one way or the other all prepared for it. Whereas COVID-19 is something, it just happened, and it was progressing very fast also. Now, I would like to have each of our panelists to let us know with the challenges that we're having right now. How are they going to, or how are you going to relaunch or to bring your business forward after this outbreak is over? Now, of course, there are some, the oil price, low oil price is a very good big plus. However, I think it is only useful if there is a cargo on the ship for you to operate. So I think for this, I will also start with Gary.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, I personally wouldn't use the term restart because we're engaged in this market, and while we're facing a lot of challenges and everyone's working from home, as you can tell here, I think we are getting it done, and we're responding as everyone who's on this panel and everyone in the world is doing. We're facing those challenges and we're delivering cargo. So I think it's a matter of facing the challenge each day, coming up with good solutions, protecting our employees and our crew, and delivering cargo in the supply chain. So really, it's a matter of working through this and then continuing to execute and delivering cargo and keeping the supply chains open. One thing I understand the comment about lower fuel prices being positive, but actually higher fuel prices slow ships down, which is good for the market, good for the environment, and so what we see here is the opposite happens with lower fuel prices. So it's not binary, it's not all positive or negative, but I thought it was worth pointing that out, that especially now what we thought, and I think we still will see that eventually, but with IMO 2020, that older, less efficient ships facing expensive VLSFO would become more inefficient and ultimately leave the fleet, which would be good for the market and good for the environment. We haven't seen that happen as of yet, but again, I'm both believe and I'm hopeful that COVID-19 is soon and quickly behind us from a humanitarian standpoint first and foremost, but also from a business standpoint, and we can get back to a more expected place than where we are today.
Thank you, Gary. It's very true that everything's got two sides of it. Now, Marco, your views on that?
Look, I think I agree with Gary with his comments. I think the starting is going to happen. I think we'll all do that by, I think, first of all, starting traveling again and seeing customers. So I think we're very much tied to the general state of the economy, which is going to be later on. As far as you were asking also as challenges that we find, I think one of the biggest challenges that we find is not from working at home, which it is something unusual, because it's not a choice, but it's an obligation. You know, sometimes you work from home because you feel like working from home. Here you have to work from home because you're obliged to work from home. So it's a different spirit. But I think the biggest thing that we're finding now, and I think the fellow owners on this panel probably will share my thing, is about the crews. We have a situation where you have crews on board that you can't disembark them because very few countries will let you disembark crews without a quarantine, very reduced flights from one place to another, and then very difficult to have crews joining the ships because no country lets them in, and then you have to put them on board of ships. So I think this is one of the biggest obstacles that we're facing on a logistical point of view now. For the rest, I think we're still working from home. I think everything is working pretty decently, but you have these areas of concern that are getting created by coronavirus.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Marco. It's true because I think working from home actually to a lot of people and companies is something which they haven't done before, but actually could be opening up a new way of working in the future. Actually, shipping, you've got the crews and the ship out there anyways, so they're kind of like working away from the office at home. Now, Captain Zhou, what about you in terms of after passing all these outbreak and things, what do you think Kwong is the best in terms of bringing the company forward?
Yes, and of course, as shared by the other panelists here, shipping and our daily business is very significantly impacted, and particularly on the operation side, as Marco just mentioned, is we also see the major the difficult part is crew change. Is really difficult, and also crew safety when they are calling other foreign port where the pandemic is there, and we are very much concerned on the crew safety. So at this moment, we also implement the home office policies, and almost half of our staffs will be working from home. We manage all the business ongoing, except we stop two things. Basically, one thing is we stopped crew change. The one is we just try to avoid to sending fresh crew going on board, because we think it is risky existing crew on board. Second, as Marco just mentioned, and basically the wider traveling restrictions. You are moving crew from one place to other place is so difficult. So we stopped. The second stop, I think is same as the other company. We stopped the essential traveling. So two things stopped. So as soon as this pandemic is under control, if the travel restrictions is lifted, I think our first thing will be start beginning to arrange for crew sign off soon as possible for their vacations. We understand that they are feeling tired and they are caring for their families, and they have been very cooperative and support the company's contingency measures by agree to continue service on board during this difficult time. Of course, second, I think we will plan to visit our clients. We are the technology provider. We are the also service provider for many owners for the management of vessel. So all of the plan will be very much depend on our clients' needs. So as soon as the situation permits, we will pay a visit to see our clients. We have not seen them for quite many times. We will listen their voices and their need for our future planning.
Thank you, Captain Zhou. Yes, shipping is a very very much a person business. So we need to see people. Now, Steve, sorry, John, I'll go for John first. What's your view on that? And apologies, but actually I think our time is getting quite...
I'll make it brief.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I certainly agree with the other panelists here. This is not about a restart. I think what's really important, I mean, if you look at ExxonMobil, we've been around 135 years. We've been through global wars and other pandemics and financial crises. What's important that we have that other in the industry have to have is, you know, mitigate their risk, have a very, very robust business continuity plan, and then be there for the customers. For us, it's their energy needs today and their energy needs of tomorrow. But it's the same thing with ship owners. You know, we heard that line about quality and on-time delivery. That's what's very, very important to everyone in the industry, to provide that services and to plan how to get from here to 2030 and to 2050. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Steve?
Yeah, I think, you know, again, I agree with the other guys, no restart required. I think shipping has proven itself over the years to be a very resilient industry. As a supplier to that industry, service provider to that industry in terms of marine fuel testing, VPS have always employed good continuity business plans, contingency plans, and that's been no different throughout, obviously, this recent issue with COVID-19. And really, you know, we are there to support our clients in terms of damage prevention, making sure the health and safety of the crew obviously are catered for, and also, you know, environmental protection and environmental compliance, and that will continue. As I say, I think shipping is a very resilient industry, and you know, we were here yesterday, and we'll certainly be here tomorrow.
Thank you, Steve. I think resilient is a very important word, and I do believe actually shipping industry is a very resilient industry. And also, we were having quite strong economic fundamentals before the COVID-19 hits us. So hopefully, we will be able to pick up from wherever we left out when the fundamentals are strong. So I think we've got a very good discussion on the topic, and thanks a lot to all the panelists. And I hope that for the next rest of today and also tomorrow, the audience will be able to get more information and updates from the panels. And of course, there are very good digital booths and also different rooms for this. So please go join them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Benjamin, thank you very much.